Good afternoon, everyone. As the last couple of people filter in, we'll get ourselves going. Welcome to this session on waste planning. My name's Michael Richardson. I'm from South Australia and I'm actually a town planner. Please don't hold either of those things against me. I've actually been doing a little bit of planning in the break, having a debate, also known as an argument, with the District Council of Streaky Bay about a retaining wall on Australia's second best named road, a Love Shack route. The retaining wall's 2.5 metres high, but the policy says 1 metre only. And our debate went along the lines of 5 years ago they approved a land division for an 1,800 square metre allotment where the edge next to the road is 12 metres higher than the other end of the allotment. So that bit of planning, by approving that allotment, has baked in an outcome where it's now not possible to comply with the policy that we're supposed to comply with. And so I guess that's why planning in whatever you're doing and whatever use you're planning for is really, really important. It's different to those operational approvals that we're often very familiar with in the resource recovery industry, because planning is often a point in time opportunity. It doesn't matter whether it's strategy, it's policy, or it's development assessment. You only get one crack at it, and if you get it wrong, it's very hard to reverse design or engineer your way out of the problem. So anyway, finding out how we do it well, we've got 4 great speakers this afternoon, and I know it's the graveyard shift, but we'll try and make it as interesting as we possibly can. Laura Woollacott is Planning and Policy Coordinator, City of Sydney, tackling tomorrow's challenges today, waste management in new developments. Welcome, Laura.
Hi everyone, afternoon, and thanks for having me at this late time in the day, so hopefully the air conditioning will keep you awake. To start off, I'd like everyone to close their eyes. Bear with me. I can't really see at the back without my glasses, but close your eyes for me just for 30 seconds. Imagine that you've just bought an apartment in a premium master planned community. It's the first night in your new place, and at 5:30 a.m, you're jolted awake by the symphony of waste. A large engine revving, reversing beeps, and the clattering of large bins being collected from the curbside. You can open your eyes now. This nightmare is a reality where waste management has not been adequately considered in new developments. The developer walks away at the end of the build, and council and community are left to deal with the consequences. As introduced, I'm Laura Woollacott. I'm the Planning and Policy Coordinator at the City of Sydney. And today I'd like to take you on what I'll call the waste planning journey. When I get this thing right. Thank you. To do this, I'll introduce waste planning as a discipline and why it matters. I'll talk about where we've come from and some of the lessons we've learnt along the way, and I'll close with some of the challenges that we're facing today with some thoughts on what next. The photo on this slide is taken in an older part of our city where properties were built long before we had a curbside wheelie bin service. There's no rear lane access, so they're landlocked, and short of placing bins within their living rooms, there's nowhere to put the bins but the street. The flow-on impacts of this include accessibility issues, footpath obstruction, vermin, and of course we get resident complaints. These are the locations that remind us of the relatively fixed nature of the built environment, which is in contrast to the changing services and behaviours and contracts that evolve over time. It also speaks to the essential role of planning in locking in good or poor outcomes. And where we do get it wrong, we have to deal with the legacy impacts for a very long time. So waste planning is an evolving and increasingly essential discipline for best practice waste management in our cities and towns. Waste planning is future focused, but it also enables new developments to make sure that they're safe and fit for collection, for efficient collection. It ensures that they can maximise resource recovery, and it makes sure that they support livable streets. It's that we don't repeat past mistakes, but instead future-proof new developments. I've worked in this space for about 3 years now, and what I've learned is that a waste planner has a key role to play in connecting the dots. We must be across operational waste considerations such as efficiency and safety. We have to be across our future service ambitions, for example, the rolling out of FO or FOGO. We have to be across our strategic objectives, such as circularity, resource recovery, and avoidance. And then we have to connect all of these together and understand how they fit within both the challenges and opportunities faced by the planning system. In doing this, a waste planning officer bridges the gap between really distinct disciplines and competing priorities. Getting waste management right matters. However, the importance of this is only growing. As you all likely know, housing across Australia is changing. Large single house blocks are no longer the norm. Sydney, other cities, and regional centres are all trending towards higher density living. As you can see on the screen, in Greater Sydney, the proportion of dwellings that are classified as medium and high density has been increasing over time. And by 2040, it's predicted that at least 50% of Greater Sydney's residents will live in multi-unit housing or residential flat buildings. As we move to that higher density living, there's more waste and recycling being produced per square footprint. The implications of getting waste management wrong here are growing. The image on the right shows an example of where waste management and collection was not properly considered in the design of a new apartment building. You can see there's significant visual and physical impacts on the public way, not to mention potential safety implications of this waste for collection. So despite being an essential service, waste management and collection is often under-considered in planning and master planning. However, waste management is a key part of what doing density well must look like as we increase in density. To give a flavour of what we do from a City of Sydney perspective, we have an officer, in addition to my role, who reviews development applications to make sure that they meet our waste planning requirements. This includes adequate space for bins, access for residents, for building managers and for our collection crews, access for our large waste vehicles, and that the proposed systems are safe and efficient. Last fin year, we reviewed 460 development applications and responded to a further 150 requests for waste planning advice. The DAs that we review range in size from houses and small shops through to large residential flat buildings, mixed-use developments, and large commercial sites. Another key part of our role is to feed any challenges and learnings that we are seeing on the ground into improving our waste planning policies and our controls. I'd now like to reflect on where we've come from and share some lessons that we've learnt along the way and hope that they can help anyone who might be on a slightly earlier part of their journey here. To reflect on how far we've come, it's useful to think about our work in the early 2010s through to the last 5 to 6 years. In that earlier period, we did have strong requirements for waste planning. However, we did not have a designated officer for waste planning. We had multiple officers giving waste planning advice on top of their full-time regular project work. We were inconsistently referred applications for review, not seeing all of the important ones, particularly large flat buildings. We gave our advice in relative isolation to other internal units, and consequently, we do see poorer waste outcomes in developments that were approved during that time. From around 2018, we had even stronger waste planning requirements and a set of guidelines that were embedded within our development control plan. We have a full-time waste planning officer who reviews applications and works really hard to build relationships. We've achieved increased buy-in and understanding across our organisation of our waste planning requirements. And we do get referred nearly every application that we need to see. Consequently, we're starting to see improved waste outcomes in our new developments. To drill down a little bit further into this, developing strong waste planning policy is of course essential. However, once you have this in place, it's all about relationships and knowledge. Where resourcing permits, it's important to have an officer or a significant part of a full-time role dedicated specifically to waste planning, and there must be time and support for that officer to upskill in this relatively new field. Our planning colleagues can also be a great source of informal knowledge about the ins and outs of the planning system once we get to know them. You have to get across the who's who of your planning department, and in the first 6 months of your role, make sure you reach out, and at least twice all those stakeholders should hear who you are, what your role is, your objectives, and your non-negotiables. You have to meet with managers, go along to team meetings to present. You really have to be the key driver of relationships with planning and other units, because they're definitely not going to come to you. It's also important not to make assumptions that those key stakeholders fully understand the rationale or the case for waste. I periodically deliver a short information session to new planners at the City of Sydney to tell them more about our city's waste service, about our planning requirements, and the why. It's crucial to link planners in with operational challenges that we're experiencing in newly built sites. We have to connect them in to how planning decisions are locking in poor outcomes. This is an image that I have shared with planners before. We call it our lazy Susan for bins. You have to laugh because otherwise you'll cry. So this is a turntable that was designed for the forward in and out movement of a waste collection vehicle safely. However, it's obstructed by the bins the truck is due to collect, because there was no additional presentation space allocated for those bins, just the turntable in a box. So you have to get to know your other internal units, other internal teams who are also providing advice on new approvals and development applications. Some of our key teams are traffic, urban design, and public domain. You have to understand what their non-negotiables are and the principles that they use to make their advice and form up their positions. This does lead into the next point. As much as we'd love it to be so, waste servicing and large vehicle access are not the only determining design requirements for new developments. It's really important to understand where the requirements that we have for waste either conflict or align with our colleagues. Conflict, for example, might look like our urban designers' perspective that large vehicle access driveways for waste vehicles look like ghastly, gaping black holes in the streetscape. Sounds very dramatic because of the height, the 4-metre height that we require. On the other hand, alignment might look like other objectives, including walkability and accessibility, that strongly align with our requirement for on-site servicing and making sure that we're not relying on the public domain for waste collection. A case study that illustrates this is a multi-building development in one of our urban renewal precincts. The different colours show the connectivity of the sites. So the blue tower and plaza building at the top are connected by basement, and the 3 buildings in green on the right are also connected by basement, but the other sites are isolated. The original design that was submitted proposed a single loading dock to service all 8 of these buildings, and the loading dock did not have enough space to present all of the bins that would be required for the residents living in these 8 buildings. It also didn't provide enough space to guarantee unrestricted access for our waste collection vehicles on collection days. Our concerns aligned with our colleagues in transport planning or traffic engineering. They were concerned about the loading capacity that had been provided, that it was insufficiently sized for the servicing needs of the site. Further, the single loading dock, combined with those isolated sites I mentioned, would require the transfer of a significant number of bulk bins across the public domain to that single loading dock marked by the purple vehicle. So the final design was not perfect. However, our alignment with other units, such as traffic and urban design, allowed us to negotiate a second loading dock, marked by the orange truck. This in turn increased the space for bins. It allowed us to accommodate a larger waste collection vehicle, and it lessened, as you can see, the transfer of bins through the public domain. You will see, however, that a council decision to not enable servicing from the street on the left does mean that some bulk bins still need to be transferred across the public domain for collection, which is a good example of some of the trade-offs and losses and concessions that we see in planning. A slight change in gear, I'd now like to talk about some of the challenges that we're experiencing at the moment. A key challenge for us is decisions that are made about developments within our local government area that are outside of our control. State significant developments are development applications that are considered to be significant by their size, value, or their strategic location. Under planning legislation, these developments are reviewed and approved by the Department of Planning and not local government. This also means that our local government development control plans do not apply to these sites. And for us in waste, this means that our strong policy, the influence and relationships that we've built up, are no longer able to influence the outcomes on this site. Our requirements, for example, our waste collection vehicle size and the frequency of our service, they're not consistently applied in these state significant sites. We therefore have residential buildings coming online that are not built to receive a standard residential waste collection service, and the flow and impacts are significant. Councils are responsible for providing a waste collection service to all residentially rated properties. However, in these cases, the need to design for that service is out of our hands. This is an example that illustrates this point. It's a mixed-use development in Redfern with a significant residential component. No provision was made for a council waste collection vehicle to enter the site, and subsequently 33 bins are transferred and presented in the public domain for collection. As you can see on the left, the bins are transferred up a vehicle ramp through the public domain and presented on the shareway, which you can see on the right. The impacts of on-street collection here include that visual and physical impact of large numbers of bins and bulky waste being presented in the shareway multiple times per week. There's potential for litter and illegal dumping from overflowing bins, and we've also got large waste vehicles having to collect waste from this highly pedestrianised area. This is an important pedestrian through link to Redfern Station, and this decision to approve collection from the street seriously detracts from this community asset. Following on from the impact of state approvals is the impact of higher order planning policies. So here I'm referring to state planning instruments that override local government controls. I could pick a few, but today I wanted to speak about the diverse and well-located homes policy piece that was brought out for consultation in December 23, very late in December 2023. This policy responds to the current housing crisis and the need to incentivise higher densities in suburbs where there's already services and infrastructure. If endorsed, this policy will override local council height limits and zoning. It will also allow for 6-storey flat buildings to be built within 400 metres of town centres and 4-storey flat buildings within 800 metres. The exhibition document included a single line, just for us, that medium density developments would not need to accommodate large vehicles entering or turning on site. The policy did not propose a size threshold for this exemption, and I'd note that depending on the lot size, 6 stories can mean a lot of units. For us, the worst case reading of this is that across the City of Sydney, new flat buildings of up to 6 stories, possibly 8 with affordable housing provisions, would not have to accommodate our waste collection vehicle, and we cannot refuse a DA on these grounds. This single line explicitly contradicted with our council's policy to push for on-site collection in new developments. On-site servicing supports walkability, urban greening, street activation, and it reduces traffic congestion. And for us in waste, it allows for safe and efficient collections. The flow and impacts of this policy have been seriously under-considered. Walkable high streets could become back-of-house service lanes, peppered with large bins and waste collection vehicles. The visuals on the right give a small taste of this, with large bins and bulky waste being collected from the curb where no on-site collection was provided for. This policy proposal ignores the essential nature of waste services and the prevalence of large waste collection vehicles within councils' fleets for efficiency. It contradicts with common council planning controls for on-site collection in residential flat buildings. And what this tells us is that we still have a lot of work to do to elevate operational waste requirements into higher order policies. Last slide. To wrap up, I'd like you to take away that waste planning is a discipline of increasing strategic importance for all councils. And once you have your policies sorted, it's all about knowledge and relationships. They are key to achieving good outcomes for waste servicing and sustainability. Despite having come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years, state-level approvals and high-order policies still present a challenge for council waste collections. And finally, we must continue to work together with our fellow councils and our regional organisations to form a consistent vision for waste servicing in high density. We must advocate for strategic recognition of operational waste management requirements, because designing for waste is an essential part of what doing density well must look like as we get more compact. Just a final imagining time. You don't have to close your eyes this time, but if you think back to that apartment that you bought, just imagine that your street is green and bin-free, waste is collected on site, and you wake up gently to sunshine and birds cheeping at 7 a.m, unless you have children or work in waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next up, I'd like to welcome Kartik Venkatraman, Talis Consultants, who's going to talk on transitioning to circular precincts. Welcome, Kartik.
Thank you, Michael, and it was a good presentation, Laura. As Laura just set up the scene of planning and the importance of planning in terms of waste management and the services we provide. Today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about, it's an agglomeration of my experiences, the project I'm working on at the moment, and Talis is working on in terms of creating the circular economy and assisting local governments across Australia in terms of how we transition to local circular economy, but also looking at different processes and the challenges and early planning of looking into the process systems and the approvals that's required in terms of planning. Just as an example, how much of planning is important in waste management. We're talking about waste collections. Even with subdivisions and the waste collections, I'm not a waste planner or a strategic planner, but being in the waste industry and being in local government and being exposed to local government, there's huge subdivisions and a lot of housing coming along. Even a slight change in terms of the cul-de-sac design from a hammerhead or from a bulk court, and what impact that makes on the waste collection systems and planning. It's quite critical, and it's a simple change, and it makes a massive change and impact on the waste collection for the community. So today's transition to circular precincts. So obviously, circular economy is the order of the day. There's been a few presentations today on circular economy, and yesterday as well, my colleague Jonathan Beckett provided a presentation on how his work on regional collaboration to circular economy precincts and what are the pros and cons that needs to be understood and considered in proceeding and progressing to embarking on the journey. So today's presentation, I will be talking, giving a high-level context around what are the challenges, opportunities, but also the pros and cons of planning and regulatory requirements around precincts and what local governments predominantly who are going to be leading the way in, towards circular economy will need to consider. So obviously, we heard this morning that circular economy is progressive, though it's in its initial stages. We are embarking on the journey. There's a momentum there. The good thing is there is state vision, state planning. There's planning documents around the strategies around different states in terms of circular economy. The industry is on board and local government leading the way and setting the scene. So there's kind of a common voice. There's some synergies there. So it's a kind of a start of a really good journey, which never happened in the past. We have the industry, the state, and the local government progressing and going through in one direction. But before we embark on the journey, it's quite critical that we understand the roadblocks in terms of planning, approvals, and what are the strategies we need to put in place from getting from point A to point B, even before we start looking at embarking on the journey for circular economy. So what does circularity mean for you? That's quite critical when you start looking at circularity, understanding the state of play. What's the current environment, planning requisites, assessment, viability, and practicality. Is it going to be financially viable? Are we going to achieve what the objectives are? What the vision of your council is? And the decision, whether we want to embark on the journey, and if we do, how do we see that happen? How do we want to make that happen? And then defining the business model. Obviously, local government is a service provider, and we do rely on alliances, joint ventures, collaboration with the industry to make things happen, including collections. So, firstly, before embarking on the journey, I think it's quite critical, as I said, identifying the planning and the procurement requirements, doing a thorough investigation, because everything costs money. And even looking at these investigations, doing the analysis, and looking at the roadblocks and setting the scene, I think there's a fair bit of financial investment from every council perspective, and that's something that needs to be considered. Analyze the options, the gaps that we have in present operations, do a risk analysis, the pros and cons, probably a SWOT analysis in terms of your capability and the risk, and what's around the region that can be tapped into, and the low-hanging fruit. Understand the existing operations is the key, so do an operational review. It's quite important to understand what's what. Are we actually, is the present operation financially viable? Are we going to be progressing in the right direction in terms of circular economy and how we proceed with the whole process? So, and also clearly define the rigor and objective of your circular economy precinct, and why are we doing this, and what's the objective? What is it going to bring to your region financially and in terms of the social impact? And obviously predict your social, environmental, regulatory, and financial inputs and impacts that's going to bring to your local council and organization. Firstly, progressing, again, looking at council and the community. We generally, the rule of thumb is, you look at people, process, planning, and execution, right, as part of the circular economy precinct and how we want to transition there. So people are very important. So getting them on board, whether it's internal staff, your council, or the community, is quite critical. So bring them on board and have the early conversations with them and try and understand their appetite to progress to a circular economy. I mean, having big visions, broad horizons, it's all good, but as long as we don't have the community, the council support, they are the enablers and the drivers to start with. So it's quite key that we have these early conversations with staff and council. Obviously, explore opportunities for collaborations. What sort of industry is available within the region? And what can be tapped into in terms of not just collection processing, where we are good at and where local government has been good at, but also looking at repurposing, remanufacturing, and kind of trying to build that low-hanging fruit and bring that precinct kind of system within the region and see what it brings to the local economy. And then the mechanisms of how to integrate the circular economy concepts to your present operations, but also looking at your collections, strategy, your storage, your processing, and the logistics. And the key thing around these factors are the kind of the planning, the statutory planning, the strategic planning, and the approvals that actually pose some challenges. So we need to understand those challenges, those hurdles, those roadblocks at the early stages of your project. And looking at advanced technology like waste to energy or anaerobic digestion, what sort of technology can be leveraged off, and what's available within your region's practicality. So once we understand that, I think it's very important for us to develop a core strategy around the circular economy precincts before we start doing a bit more. Obviously, the process development in terms of what sort of processes, what sort of systems, what sort of approvals, and what planning is required, engaging with the right departments within the state and local within your council in terms of planning, obviously looking at the regulatory framework, the business model that you're going to be looking at as a kind of a circular economy precinct, and stakeholder mapping. Who are the stakeholders you're going to be engaging, involving, and kind of having those conversations at the early stages. And of course, the procurement process in terms of what sort of stages are you going to have? Are you going to go out to a market sounding or an EOI, or then and the tender process, and what is it going to look like? So having that framework already set up, it's going to be critical. And obviously, one of the things that you could look at is a stage approach. Stage approach, you don't have to have you might have a circular economy precinct in mind, you might have an existing facility that is kind of suitable for your circular economy, but you could start having a kind of a master plan and looking at one aspect at a given point of time rather than having the whole apple in one go, which again makes it more viable for small and regional councils. And then target the whole low-hanging fruits. Obviously, organics has been the agenda for majority of the councils and also the state. We've got the regional plans which align looking at the organics plan. So look at organics as a starting point and then kind of develop that into a bit more concrete circular precinct. As I said, there are certain aspects of regulatory and planning that needs to be considered as we progress and embark on this journey for a circular economy precinct. Obviously, the legislative requirements, the key strategies, the plans, the agenda that the state has, and what implication that it has on your regional precinct, and how that works out, how that pans out, what are the financial implications. I think that needs to be analyzed at the front end. Understand the regulatory framework, understand what are the plans, what are the infrastructure. Every state has probably an infrastructure plan, a circular economy precinct plan, and every state has identified precincts that around the state that actually have been allocated for different resource recovery, processing, and circular economy hubs, and also looking at those and how do they align with your region. I think that's quite critical. Looking at licenses and permits, if you're looking at your existing landfills, your waste facilities, how does those precincts cumulative have an impact on your license conditions and permits? Have that conversation with your state government agencies at the early stages. I think Zoning and compliance with, again, if you're looking at a greenfield site or a brownfield site as a circular economy precinct, looking at the planning requirements, the zoning requirements, and how those amendments and the will be applied, and what sort of lead times and costs will be applicable. I think that needs to be considered at of the very early stages. Obviously, there's also infrastructure compliance in terms of planning scheme amendments. I think that's quite critical. While in the waste industry, we don't talk the language of the planning and statutory planning and strategic planning on a daily basis. I think it's to have that early conversations with your internal departments of how these planning schemes will have impact on your precinct and the process. And so you're not actually working too hard and not going that far in the journey, so you're having roadblocks with these planning, stat plan and strategy planning, which often I've seen in major infrastructure projects in councils where there's not much planning done in terms of what and foreseen, and there are quite a few roadblocks which then put a hold on the timelines, the timeframes, and then the cost increases over a period of time. So you don't want to have those implications on your project. So it's quite important that you have a look at those aspects. Logistics compliance, one of the things, obviously, one of the projects that I have been working on and got kind of an oversight is looking at the roads, the infrastructure that to lead to your circular economy, to the processing plant, and looking at whether the road is conducive for what sort of trucks, the truck size, what's the weight, if you have bridges across the roads, what's the load limit. Getting that early logistics review undertaken, and also the NHVR regulation, which is quite critical in terms of getting your cost and feasibility in terms of whether this is circularity and circular precinct, making it more financially conducive. And of course, getting the relevant approvals in a given time and avoid any delays, to avoid any further financial implications. In terms of planning, strategic planning is quite key. I think early on, have those conversations with your internal strategic planning departments. Laura is in that space. I'm sure there's many discussions happening within the departments, inter-departments also, looking at the growth predictions, housing strategy, and also looking at what sort of developments are going to be happening around the sites that you're going to be looking at for this precinct. Obviously, there's also a relevant state planning like we have in Queensland. There is definitely, the infrastructure roadmap, which identifies a lot of state government land within Queensland where circular hubs can be created. And so there may be similar sort of strategies, plans in other states and across your region. So try and explore that. Have a good conversation with your state agencies, be it Department of Planning or your Environmental Protection Agency. Have the conversations, have the approvals, and have the strategic planning requirements well aligned with your process. And looking at obviously traffic assessment and working with your national heavy vehicle regulator for in terms of understanding your logistics study, and if you have any rail network within your region, how that fits in within with your circular economy precinct, and how that actually contributes towards your waste movement or material movement from your precinct to the processing place. And one of the biggest thing has been if it's a greenfield site or a brownfield site, looking at cultural heritage is one of the aspects. Which again has been highlighted in many of our infrastructure projects across local governments, where there's been a project that's been initiated, and due to cultural heritage issues or challenges, there's been a roadblock and time delays, and again, financial implications. So obviously, look at the feasibility of the whole exercise, starting from before you embark on actually making a decision whether we want to proceed with the circular economy precinct. Whether it's achievable, ask yourself a question, ask your council, your appetite, and the appetite that your council and the community have to drive this. Is it going to be achievable? What sort of collaborative opportunities we have? What synergies are there? And does it tie in with your, council vision? Do an options analysis before. What sort of options we have? What can we stage this? Is it going to be a staged approach? What are the low-hanging fruits? How can we tap into those resources? Does it stack up in terms of the finance, in terms of technology? Is it, there are councils with low population, low feedstock, tyranny of distance, cost. It has been an ongoing issue for councils across Australia. And obviously, are we making the circular difference? Is it really enhancing the economy of the region? And are we actually making a difference to the material flow and the life cycle of the material within the region? Again, to close, I would probably highlight the fact that the sustainability of any precinct is quite critical. So understand what's required, whether it's financial sustainability or the future of even from a carbon perspective, looking at the life cycle, what can be achieved within the region, understanding the whole close the loop system. Is it going to be done in a very sustainable manner? Is it going to be reliable? And is council ready? I think it's something that's very critical. If you don't have the whole council ready and you're embarking on the journey, then you're going to set yourself to fail. And are we ready to make the shift and embark on the journey? I think that's quite critical for us to understand and comprehend before we do that. So the key takeaway is start engaging with the relevant departments, your council, your people, and the relevant stakeholders, the industry, in terms of what we want to do, how we want to do, and what can be achieved. Investigate all the pros and cons, whether it's strategic planning, environmental planning, or even logistic planning, and look at whether it's going to be, if the numbers are going to stack up. Integrate the operations with the circular precincts, because you all have operations within your region. I think it's critical that we integrate that with the operational and while creating that hub or the circular precinct. And collaborate with the industry at every level so that the dialogue is open and there are opportunities. And not just the industry, when I'm talking about the waste industry, but also processing. There are industries within the region that may be able to use the product that's been processed as a byproduct for creating more alternative materials. Innovate where possible, and then do a lot of research, planning, and analysis before you start even embarking on that circular economy journey. So that's for me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kartik. Next up, we've got Esther Hughes. Esther, Principal Environmental Consultant, Approvals and Policy with MRA Consulting Group, and she'll be speaking to us this afternoon on waste management precincts. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you, Michael. You're always a little bit worried when the person before you talks about precincts and you're about to talk about precincts as well. But thankfully, there's not too much overlap between mine and Kartik's excellent presentation. When I was thinking about this, I was going to say something like silver bullet for circular economy, and then I thought, no, well, how about superhero? This could possibly be the next solution or part of the solution for circular economy. I've got a couple of credits. Thank you very much to Circle Recycling for their input to this presentation, and also to Regional Growth Development Corporation for their input as well. I've noticed too in some of the other presentations and discussions that are going on that planning is really quite important to delivering our infrastructure to delivering a circular economy, to making sure that materials move from one place to another, and it can be quite a barrier as well, as you will find out. So let's move on. I'm going to talk quite quickly. It's not because I'm nervous, it's because I want to get through all this. I've got a fairly long presentation. All right, so infrastructure need, you would be aware of the 80% resource recovery targets. In New South Wales, that means 5.7 million tonnes of capacity is needed. It also means we need to invest about $1.4 billion, and establish over 150, look, not quite sure yet, but 150 new facilities, upgrade existing facilities. Now, all this infrastructure needs to be accommodated geographically and socially. It has to sit somewhere in our state and in the other states. So moving toward a circular economy is a model that requires built infrastructure. Sometimes providing built infrastructure can be an issue, as you can see in this example at Gunnedah, where they had quite a bit of community opposition to their facility. Now, their facility is marked here in yellow. Anything that's purple is an industry zone, as the planners in the room know. Up here is actually a coal mine. It's the Whitehaven coal facility. Over here is the nearest residence. It's about 1 kilometre away. And over here is the beginning of the town precinct, more than 3.5 kilometres away. Slated to process up to 250,000 tonnes per annum of construction and demolition waste. The proponent said it's not a dump. Its prime focus is to reclaim, reuse and recycle. Anybody else in the room been in that position? Okay, we're going to talk about a precinct model, which is basically an area that is designated for a purpose or for a range of purposes in the planning model. I've come up with 4 basic precinct models. There may be others. This is not based in research. These are my ideas. It could be one large facility, such as a landfill. I suppose Woodlawn is a really great example of that, where they've got a large facility as a precinct. It could be multiple synergistic CE precincts, and the idea of that is that one output from one facility is the input to another facility, and so it goes around in a circular economy model. It could be simply a line around a designated area, which is what you get when you have a policy document, mostly a map which says this is a waste precinct. And it could also be sort of an extension of that, where you've got this shopping centre model, where you have an anchor tenant, a large facility, perhaps a MRF or a landfill, which has other uses introduced into it. I'm going to go through 3 states in Australia just to demonstrate what they've been thinking of in terms of precincts. We're going to go firstly to Victoria. You may have heard about the Victorian hub model. This has been encapsulated in 7 regional resource recovery implementation plans and the statewide resource recovery infrastructure plan, the SWRP. The Victorian hub model, I was hearing from David Cox, our manager in Victoria, our growth development management in Victoria, and this, the SWRP is going to be, and these 7 plans are going to be overtaken soon by the Victorian Recycling Infrastructure Plan, the VRIP. And he was saying he's not quite sure whether the precinct model is going to continue underneath the new plan. It will be released in 2024. The current plans facilitate hubs, which are a facility or a group of facilities which recover or manage material streams of waste. The hubs are classified as local, designed to be a first point of aggregation, regional, which service both local and more sophisticated infrastructure, state, which provides services to the local area or one or more regions in Victoria, high order resource recovery, assuming you agglomerate a fair number of materials And this is just an example of where the hubs of state importance are. There's quite a few around the metropolitan region, and there's others in the regional areas as well. The characteristics of the hubs of state importance, they could be, as I said, one facility or several facilities. There is an emphasis on co-location of similar industries. There are economics of scale. They will observe buffer distances. There should be job creation and investment, reduced transport costs, and increased volumes of materials recovered. And as an example, we did a project which happened to be located in the Ordish Road precinct. You can see that the precinct is surrounded by other industry and also serviced by a major road. So there's good transport links to that area. It helped that this particular facility was located in somewhere that had already been designated as a waste and resource recovery hub. Okay, moving on to Queensland. Queensland is developing recycling enterprise precincts. This is fairly new. They are said to be not landfill sites. They are not intended to manage waste. The purpose is to gain resources from waste materials. They're intended to facilitate a circular economy and research opportunities, and they should be viewed as places for industrial and economic growth. I like that there is a focus on resources that the Queensland government is trying to instill. There are two types of precincts. There are prepare precincts and transform precincts. Prepare precincts use materials locally or get them ready to be transported to other sites. They are generally smaller in scale. They handle all commodities, and examples are collection, sorting, decontamination, size reduction, etc. Now, I'm a little bit sceptical. I'm not sure if you have been to a MRF lately, but collection and decontamination can be quite large, and it can be quite impactful as well. Never mind, there are also transform precincts. Transform precincts are likely to be larger facilities and, sorry, I'm trying to stop it going all the time. They're larger facilities and harder to locate. They should be in industrially zoned lands, and they should be buffered from surrounding land uses. They're expected to attract co-location of research, and examples are heating, melting, composting, shredding, pulping, etc. And there's also been released a how-to guideline to set up precincts by the Queensland Government, and which cover off on key actions, activities and matters to consider. So if you're from Queensland and you're interested in establishing a precinct or getting support for your precinct, I suggest that's where you go. Now, if you thought that this was all just words on paper, they've put more thought into this than you would have imagined. This is where the precincts are to be located. There's obviously preparatory activities in every single one of them, but if you wish to invest in one of those streams of materials, this is where you go, and research is included as well. They've also put some thought, you'll find this is a common theme throughout my presentation, into where the location should be. And generally that also follows the same thread of being co-location, close to transport, and with reasonable buffer distances and no impact upon, or limited impact on nearby residences. So moving on to New South Wales. New South Wales introduced a whole raft of strategies in 2021. Many of you know that they are having another look at the infrastructure plan. Esther and Tony would have mentioned that during the course of this conference. The one that addresses precinct is the Energy from Waste infrastructure plan, and it has, again, this very similar diagram and very similar objectives when they're trying to address the precinct model, transport, co-location, be away from high density residential areas, etc. If you're involved in energy from waste, you also realise that there are 4 precincts throughout New South Wales that have been designated for energy from waste, which are Northern Rivers, Lithgow, Goulburn, Mulwaree and Parks. Outside of those areas, you cannot establish an energy from waste facility in New South Wales. We're going to focus on Parks because that one has also been designated as a waste precinct. Parks is an activation precinct. It has special planning rules. There are 4: Moree, Snowy Mountains, Wagga Wagga and Parks, which is the waste one. This slide was provided by the Regional Growth Development Corporation. They want you all to know a bit more about the Parks precinct. It has alignment with the Unido Eco-Industrial and the Unido Eco-Industrial Park Framework, which includes objectives for clean energy, climate action, responsible consumption, etc. It is accredited to ISO 14001. The objective is to co-locate land and industry clusters to make innovation and recycling, resource sharing quicker, easier and more feasible. It is also aiming to join a network of businesses committed to innovation, resource optimisation, positive ESG outcomes, etc. So, Parks is located here. It's on the Inland Rail. It's within a regional area of New South Wales. It has 6 sub-precincts. The orange has been designated for resource recovery, but you can also establish resource recovery in the purple zone. It is governed by a master plan and a delivery plan. Baseline technical studies have already been completed, for example, land contamination, air quality and odour, noise and vibration, cultural heritage. It does not require an environmental impact statement or a statement of environmental effects. So if you're a planner, you'll be going, what the heck does it need then? Because they're the 2 planning documents that you need for any development in New South Wales. The Parks process requires an activation precinct certificate. It's made to the Regional Growth and Development Corporation. It has to consider the master plan and the delivery plan, and it is determined within 30 days. Let me say that again, it is determined within 30 days. In most instances, then the development proceeds via a complying development pathway. They have a concierge service, approach the concierge service, prepare the documentation, respond to the request for information. The activation precinct certificate is issued and then apply for complying development certificate. We completed a project in Parks for Circle Recycling Proprietary Limited. They are e-waste processors. They have an advanced plant in Parks. We provided a report with a detailed description of the proposed activity and an analysis of potential impacts. We demonstrated compliance with the master plan and with the development control plan. We demonstrated alignment with the Unido Eco-Industrial Park Framework. We provided supporting studies for air quality and noise. We lodged the precinct certificate application on the 30th of June, and we were issued with the certificate on the 1st of August. So we didn't quite make the 30-day time frame, but 2 months is pretty damn good in planning time frames as it is. Okay, wrap up. Okay, we'll bring it all together. So precincts which are pre-designated for waste uses are more likely to be acceptable in the general community. We talk a lot about social licence in the waste industry. mostly because people think that waste is always going to be dirty, smelly and noisy. Precincts generally include buffer zones, which are also advantageous to be able to set up there. They facilitated circular economy by co-location, and other industrial uses can be located within waste precincts. Potential issues, they might not be located where you want them to be. So on that note, it's probably a good idea that there are several precincts rather than one great big one. If I had a preference, I'd say no, chop it up, put one in north, south, east, wherever. Councils and the community need to be supportive of a waste precinct. They do generally generate economic activity, so they can be used to win over councils and the community in that regard. And they also usually need special planning assistance to make them desirable. Ideally, this is my wish list. There would be large buffer distances to the nearest sensitive receiver. I would think about 1 kilometre, depending on what you're doing. Several similar uses can be co-located, which is great. There should be a quick planning regime. There should be good logistics. They should be effective in embedding a social licence. It would be great to have financial support, a concierge service, and of course they need to protect the local environment as well. So what happened at Gunnedah? In 2022, it was reported that the Gunnedah waste facility would be scaled back as a result of community opposition. The first part of the application, the CIS request, was submitted in July 2020. The project has not yet reached termination after being in the planning process for about 4 years. Now, I'm not sure what else has happened behind the scenes, but I'm quite sure that the opposition from the community would have played a large part in why that facility was not able to go ahead. Could it be different? I think it could have been if there was a waste precinct in the area. I also think that having precincts as part of our planning regime going forward for the circular economy is just not just a nice to have. I think it is vital. So thank you very much, everyone. No time for questions? Okay.
Thank you very much, Esther. That was fantastic. Our last speaker this afternoon is Valentina Petrone, Associate Director, Circular Economy Lead, WSP Australia, talking about circular economy in Council's planning controls. Welcome, Valentina.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for staying until the last speaker. That's me. My name is Valentina Petrone. I'm based in Sydney. I'm part of the WSP National Waste Management and Circular Economy team. I'm an architect and an urban designer by background, and today my presentation will be about the opportunities and benefits of embedding circular economy requirements in council planning controls. And why I'm really strongly advocating for this is because by doing that, we will reduce the amount of demolition and C&D waste generated, we will contribute to reduce embodied carbon, and we'll be ultimately contributing to designing more resilient cities and achieving a circular economy in the built environment. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. And also I would like to highlight that when we work on projects, we always work in collaboration with our Indigenous Services team, and we try to apply a circular economy approach with an Indigenous lens. So in my presentation, I will try to keep it as light as possible. I will provide a quick introduction of what a circular economy in the built environment means. Then I will provide a quick overview of the current policy that's been released that talk about circular economy and identifying what are the gaps, because a lot has been produced, but still there are some gaps for real implementation. And looking at what are the waste trends for planning approval across Australia, what are the opportunities and how we can really implement those requirements at DA application and town planning. So my vision that I would like to share with you today is what if nearly every development application or town planning approval for new developments across our cities has some sort of requirements or mechanism to demonstrate alignment with circular economy design principles. A lot has been already spoken in the past 2 days about what is circular economy, so I won't dive too much into it, but just one thing I would like to restate is that it's very important we always relate to the 3 principles of a circular economy. So first of all, we want to design out waste, then keep materials in use at the highest value for as long as possible, and then regenerate natural systems or return materials to systems. And ideally, in a circular economy, we will not be talking anymore about waste, but just talking about resources, and our bins will be very small and nearly empty. That's the goal. And circular economy in the built environment particularly is very important to achieve net zero targets. According to this diagram from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, thanks to all the new initiatives and use of renewable energy and innovative technologies in energy saving and design of assets, we can reduce up to 55% of the energy consumption. But the remaining 45% is related to good design choices and product selection. And Scope 3 emissions is definitely the next element coming up for all organizations and companies, and really looking at what are the opportunities. So embodied carbon is definitely a metric, but construction and demolition waste, fit-out waste, we are now dealing with organic waste, they're all parts of a bigger picture, so we are really have the tools to make a great difference in terms of the net zero journey. So what is ideally a circular built environment? It's a fairly complex topic that we have tried to summarize with this diagram. So if you look at the black icons and black arrows, a business as usual or a linear approach is that we design our asset, we use standard materials, often they are virgin materials, we apply business as usual or conventional design processes. We don't think about the whole life cycle of an asset. We don't think about what an asset might be used in 5 or 10 years. We, once the asset is built, we undertake minimal maintenance required, and then when we don't need any more as is, we just demolish and start from scratch. And unfortunately, due to many reasons, often those materials that are just generated from demolition waste is often downcycled or goes to landfill. In an ideal world, we would like to approach a circular design approach to new assets. So looking at strategies such as adaptive reuse, design for longevity, design for flexibility, and what about ease of maintenance and the product stewardship. And ideally, the ending point of an existing project will become the starting point of a new project. This is definitely a major shift. I've been my whole career working in the construction industry, and this can't happen in silos. We really need to be working across all stakeholders and across all project stages. But in my presentation today, I will focus on the local governments and planners' point of influence. So how can we drive change through the implementation of additional requirements for circular economy? And I had the pleasure to co-author with the New South Wales State Government the Circular Design Guidelines for the Built Environment. They have been already referenced twice today, so I'm very happy about that. And ideally, this presentation will offer a bit of a next steps from where we go from that broader state government level guidance to individual councils. As I mentioned, in the past years, there have been a variety of policy that has been published around the circular economy. We have great national guidance documents. We have state policy documents. They all refer and mention the importance of design and the opportunity with the built environment, but they only provide a preliminary direction. There are still lots of gaps, and there are many representatives from councils in the room that understand the challenge. I've been very pleased to see in the past weeks that a new interim report from the Circular Economy Ministerial Advisory Group has clearly pointed out that the built environment is one of the 6 focus areas, and that particularly guidance number 16 is talking about the importance of including clear requirements across the board nationally and looking at pushing the bar for circular economy requirements. So we are definitely heading in the right direction. At state level, as I mentioned, there's been some additional guidance documents like the New South Wales Circular Design Guidelines and the Circular Economy in South Australia documentation, and they provide additional practical guidance to stakeholders. You can imagine the whole designers, contractor, builders, facility managers, council staff, planner, etc. But there is still a bit of a gap. So the opportunity, in my opinion, is here. So we have, as all local governments, they all have a variety of local government, waste government guidelines, resource recovery guidelines, and definitely circular economy is recognized as an important component. They mostly focus on waste reduction, food waste separation, increased resource recovery, the importance of data collection, and many of them mention C&D waste. We also know that across the board, there are very good initiatives, like Laura was pointing out before, in terms of waste management guidelines for design. So there is already a process and a system that designers and developers are aware of about meeting operational waste guidelines. So the opportunity is to piggyback on that and looking at how we can expand on the operational waste management guidelines requirements for the application and include requirements for construction and demolition waste avoidance and circularity in design. The idea is not to reinvent the wheel, but really trying to build up on a process that is already in place. And I'm very well aware about all the challenges the construction industry is facing at the moment with housing crisis and increasing construction costs. So the idea is, as I mentioned, to leverage a system that is already in place and apply a step-by-step approach to support the transition in collaboration with all stakeholders and demonstrating that at the end of the day, there won't be any additional cost. It will be a shift in the market, a shift in how we design our asset that will last longer and will be higher quality. Our team, in partnership with the New South Wales planning team, particularly Eleanor Perry, we did some work in partnership with WS Rock in New South Wales, looking at what are the specifically opportunities in the New South Wales framework. So a lot of changes have happened at the New South Wales state government level. For example, changes to the planning SAP and changes to the basics requirements, which is a level of certification that talks about embodied carbon. There is a new apartment design guidelines that start introducing concepts like adaptive reuse and design for flexibility. But really, the great opportunity for councils is to make amendments to their local development control plans and include additional requirements with respect to construction and demolition waste avoidance and circularity in design. And these ideas are strongly and very well supported by what's happening globally. So there are lots of international best practice examples that show how this has been trialed and tested with different aspects tailored to the local context. So, for example, the Greater Paris area has a document and is proposing a voluntary approach to start with that is based on performance-based criteria. Greater London has made a great progress across the past few years, starting from a very simple voluntary socioeconomic statement, and now they're heading into a more detailed assessment of C&D waste and assessing all the different design strategies. City of Amsterdam has gone a bit ahead, and they are looking at assessing 32 criteria for socioeconomic compliance. And even in Vancouver, for example, I've been traveling the past month, they're looking at a demolition permit and additional requirements for proponents. So there is a big variety of, a large variety of opportunities that can be tailored to each individual council requirements. And with our team, we are really passionate about this topic and really trying to push the boundaries on any project we work. So we have trialed and tested a collaborative approach with all the design disciplines. Sometimes we coordinate up to 15 different disciplines working on projects, and also working with the builders and the contractor on site, because this is a very new approach, and we really need to work together to make sure that there is a good progression and we can really implement these solutions. And all the work we've been doing in this area has provided some great preliminary results. So, for example, we have been working on a project with the University of Tasmania, their new campus, and we've been able to, by engaging with all the different design disciplines, we've been able to achieve great results in terms of adaptive reuse, design for disassembly, selecting low-impact materials, and, for example, design for flexibility. So it's going to be a staged development for the campus, but we have already planned in advance where the services will be and how there will be minimal disruption to the university operations while the next stages of the development will be in place. And then we are very proud that with our own office refurbishment, we have been working hard with all the different, different disciplines and with the builders on site, and we'll be able to disassemble, temporarily store, and then reinstall and reuse a huge variety of materials, starting from ceiling tiles, blinds, workstations, but also reusing some HVAC units and signage, for example, and lighting. And for anything that wasn't fit for purpose, we managed to disassemble and donate it to charities. And just to finish up, I would like to highlight what could be next steps. So this is a very major shift, as I mentioned, and working with WS Rock, who are ahead of the game in this space, we have identified what are the key areas in which we need all to work together. And definitely education is very, very important. Leading by example, so having selecting pilot projects or particularly design competition, that could be a great opportunity to test this approach. Incentives will help, of course, and looking at proposing these changes into planning requirements will really take the construction industry into the next stage. That's me very happy in our on-site storage, because we managed to salvage lots of materials. That wasn't easy at all. The contractor, the first day I came on site, they wanted to kill me. And now they're all very proud because how much they have been able to reuse, just because we were involved very early in the design process. We provided them with practical tools and guidance and lots of patience, and altogether we are achieving a great result. So I hope that's my presentation has sparked some ideas, and I'll be around for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentina. We're actually ahead of time, which is fantastic. Dinner's at 6:15. It's about 5 minutes away, so I've got about an hour and 20 minutes for some questions. Maybe not. But do we have any questions from the floor? If you do have a question, just put your hand up and just wait for the microphone before you ask it. Oh, come on, someone.
Hi Laura, this is a question for you. I'm ex-City of Melbourne, and we took the approach of convincing the minister that all approvals that went direct to him had to be referred to the local authority. Has that been attempted in New South Wales? Because I was gobsmacked by the fact that you've lost control of ministerial applications.
Thanks for the question. I'm actually not sure. It's been on our list of, I guess, next steps is working more with our strategic planning side, not just the stat planners, and looking to do an advocacy piece around this. But to my knowledge, that's not the case. And yeah, it's really punishing for councils. And I'm not sure of the SSDs across Sydney, but for us, we are finding pretty poor outcomes, and just not like. We can advocate for our controls, our planners push for our controls to be implemented, but we have no determination of that. Yeah, but I'll definitely look to Victoria to see what's been done there. Thanks.
Any more questions? Yep.
Laura, this is for you as well. It must have been a good presentation. I'm just wondering if you've got any controls in place for the implementation of FOGO in MUDs or SUDs. Is there any discussion or thought about that?
Thank you. I was hoping I wouldn't have to speak about this. So we currently have a DCP update that's been waiting for maybe 18 months to go through and be endorsed. In there we have generation rates for FO currently. We're not 100% sure where we're going yet. And so they will at least allow for a spatial allocation for that stream. That being said, definitely give a shout out to Wes Rock, who's been doing a lot of work in this space, that there is a lot that could be done in terms of being more prescriptive around what infrastructure setups should look like to see FO and FOGO success in high-rise, for example. But it's a pretty tricky space, because there's a lot of trade-offs between source separation being prioritised and the cost to buildings of that, versus putting the bins in the basement at a cheap cost to the owners ongoing, but not having as much participation. So there's a lot of complexity there. So we don't currently have prescriptive controls around how the system will work, but we're at least putting the generation rates to make sure that it's on paper and needs to be considered by developers. So, yeah.
I've actually got a question too. This one's for Esther. That expedited planning process that you described in the precinct, that's obviously very substantially expedited compared to a typical planning application for those sorts of uses. How much impact does the benefit of that process actually have to proponents when they're going through their site selection processes to choose those precincts with the ability to access that process versus other locations?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, definitely quicker than your retaining wall, Michael.
Yep.
It was actually designed to attract investors to the Parks precinct, which is why they put so much effort in the back end of it to develop all the studies, etc. So they've done all the background studies for land contamination and heritage and all that, which is gold for anybody who's trying to look into it and go, okay, well, what do we need to do? The Parks precinct is, as I said, an activation precinct. It's developed by the Regional Growth Development Corporation. They want people to locate there, and it is far away from Sydney, if you haven't picked up on that yet. It's the location of one of the next energy from waste plants. And so they're leveraging the inland rail, the energy from waste, and potential to transport waste by rail to parks. And they've packaged that all with quick planning approvals and support by the Regional Growth Development Corporation. So yes, it is designed to do that, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because we don't talk about it enough in the waste industry, to say, well, we're all waiting for something like this to happen. It is happening. We do have one. It's out in parks. That in itself could be an issue, and I've heard people say, couldn't you move that model closer to Sydney? My opinion is you won't, because they're trying to get you to go out there, right? So why would you take that model and put it closer to Sydney? Because, you know, that would just blow their whole economic and development reason for doing this. But yeah, rail infrastructure, so cheaper transport links as well. Not yet there, but it should be good for anybody who wants to agglomerate materials in a regional area and have quick and cheap approvals.
Thanks, Esther. Last opportunity for questions? No? Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'll just ask you to put your hands together for Laura, Kartik, Esther and Valentina one more time.